Okay? All right. Yahweh has a purpose for every circumstance of life for those who believe in him, trust in him, and obey him. Esther, chapter 4, starting in verse 1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud voice, loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate. For none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whatsoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maid and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther for Hathach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hathach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasury for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given to Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make requests before him for her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spoke unto Hathach, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. And all the king's servants and the people of the king's province do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. They told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holds thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knows whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present at Shushan, and fast you for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Esther 5. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel, stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in his royal house over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom.
Hallelujah.
And Esther answered, If it seems good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared, and the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. What is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom, it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do it tomorrow, as the king has said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes of the servants of the king. Haman said, Moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity has been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, Behold, Haman stands in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to honor more than me, myself? And Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delights to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king used to wear, and the horse that the king rides upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, and they may array the man withal whom the king delights to honor, and bring him on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sits at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hastened to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all of his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. The king said again unto the Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. What is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, to be perished. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that does presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went out into the palace garden. Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the palace at the banquet of wine, and Haman had fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in this house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good of the king, stands in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. On the day that did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Esther spoke yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right before the king, and I be pleased in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come upon my people? How can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write you also for the Jews, as it likes you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man reverse. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is, the month of Seven, on the 23 day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and to the deputies and rulers of the provinces which are from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the ring, the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules and camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people in providence that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for the commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves of their enemies. So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment. And the decree was given at Shushan, the palace. Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, whatsoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for fear of the Jews fell upon them. We cannot always see the hand of Yahweh in the midst of our situations, but we must learn to trust him and allow him to have his will performed through us, so that we will not miss accomplishing the work that he has called us to do in his kingdom. The story of Esther is one of the most well-known stories of the entire Bible. It's a short book, only 10 chapters, but it records for all posterity the faithfulness of a young Jewish girl who was born into slavery. She was a slave to King Ahasuerus. We know him as Xerxes I, the son of King Darius. Now Darius was the king who had Daniel thrown into the lion's den. King Xerxes, troubled with distrust of his wife Queen Vashti, had banished Vashti from Persia and then sought a new queen among the young women of his kingdom. This is when Esther was forced to become the queen of Medo-Persia and wife of King Xerxes I. Esther was quite comfortable with her ordinary life and did not like the idea of being cast into the light of public life as a queen. She would rather have stayed at home and been an ordinary girl, but Yahweh had a plan for her life, and she was only beginning to follow. Does this sound familiar to you? Do you feel that you are being pushed, dragged, or convinced to move on into unfamiliar territory? Is there a tug at your heart to do something different? Is there a stirring in your heart that says something has to change? The believer's walk is a faith walk. Yahweh doesn't always reveal his perfect will and allows us to see the destiny that he has set in place for our lives. He asks us to trust him and to take a leap of faith, allowing him to guide our every step until we come to the end. Often, it is not until we have reached the millstone or accomplished a major goal that we can look back and see that, Yahweh was directing me all this while. I have often just could not understand why Yahweh has placed me in the position where I am right now. Perhaps Yahweh has placed us in a job environment, or a school environment, or a family situation where we are overwhelmed by the powers of darkness all around us. Perhaps you are questioning Yahweh. Why am I here? Can't I accomplish great things for your kingdom at some other place? Isn't there an easier, more productive field where I can work and bring an increase of the harvest of souls into the kingdom of Yahweh? Esther felt that same pain in her life too. She could not understand why Yahweh would allow her to be forced to marry a pagan king. and be taken from her family to live in a palace where she felt more like a prisoner than a queen. According to the laws of Persia, she could not even go to her husband, the king, without prior approval. If Esther were to attempt to walk into the presence of the king without permission, she would be instantly killed if he didn't want to see her. Yahweh is not forcing you and me to do anything because this is a volunteer army. At any time we desire, we can turn away from the place where Yahweh has us and do what we want to do. But there are consequences to disobedience. We must stop to realize that Yahweh never allows anything in our lives by accident, but that every circumstance that we face is there for a greater purpose than we can see at the moment. So your job is negative, too time demanding, not exactly what you think that ought to be. So what? There is no perfect job out there. None. Every one of us must learn to listen to Yahweh and make the best of whatever situation we find ourselves in. How many times have people said, I just have to find a better job. I just have to find a better church. I just have to find a happier life. When are we going to realize that isn't the job, the church, or our spouse, or our circumstances that determine our happiness? It is our attitude in the midst of trials that determine our happiness. Abraham Lincoln said, a man is about as happy as he makes up his mind to be. You determine your own happiness by your own attitude. Don't allow your circumstances to steal your joy. I know life is unfair. I know that life is hard at times. I know that we often can't see the forest from the trees. But we must learn to trust Yahweh to bring into our path those things that He wills for our life, and then help us to be victorious in whatever circumstances come. Yahweh has some of you in unpleasant job situations. Let your light shine that men may see Yeshua in you. You just might be the only light in that dark place. You have the message of hope that no one else may have, so don't join in with the rest of the grumbling and complaining. Have faith in Yahweh, trust Him, and let your life be a witness. Yahweh has some of you in troublesome homes, environments, with unsaved parents or unsaved spouses. Live for Yeshua. He has promised to let all things work out to your good. That little phrase, all things, covers a lot of ground. Your trust in Yahweh and commitment in Messiah may be the only chance that your family will ever have to see what the love of Yahweh is really about. Let some light shine. Even if they never change and come to Messiah, your duty is to live for Yahweh and love them anyways. Esther faced the possibility of death if she went to see the King Xerxes unannounced. I want you to know that if you fail to carry out the will of Yahweh in your life, you may face the death penalty too. If we fail to live for Yahweh, we are in rebellion against Yahweh, and rebellion is sin, and the penalty of sin is death. We must be about our Father's business. We must work where we are and do the best we can under every circumstance, and then trust Yahweh for the victory. The day came when Esther's circumstances were proven to be according to Yahweh's providence. Through underhanded methods and because of hatred for the Jews, some of Xerxes' counselors had passed a decree that all of the Jews in the land of Persia were to be put to death because of a fear of rebellion against the king. Understand that the devil never stops trying to destroy the Jews, and he will never stop trying to destroy believers in Yahweh and Yeshua. Pharaoh of Egypt had tried to destroy Israel, and Yahweh stopped him at the Red Sea. Haman of Persia in Queen Esther's day was trying once again. Adolf Hitler in the German Republic would attempt to annihilate the Jews in death camps in World War II, but Yahweh would stop him. The Antichrist in the last days will attempt to annihilate believers in Yeshua Messiah, but Yeshua will stop him. Just as Satan had attempted to destroy the Jews in Israel, he attempts to destroy those who are grafted into the family of Yahweh as believers. His job is to kill, steal, and destroy every one of you, and he never sleeps and he never quits trying, but he will not succeed because Yeshua is greater in you than the power of the devil over you. Esther came to realize that Yahweh had placed her in the palace of the king of Persia for this specific time and purpose. All of the hours of loneliness, separation from family and friends, questioning why Yahweh has allowed this to happen, wondering why she was destined to carry such a heavy burden all of her life, were now answered by the fact that Yahweh could use her to save her people and herself. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. Those were the words of Mordecai to Esther. He knew she was afraid to speak. Who would not be under the penalty of death? Mordecai also knew that if Esther did not do her duty, that Yahweh would still deliver the Jews, but Esther would suffer for being disobedient. Yahweh isn't limited by whether we obey him or not. To obey him, step up and be encouraged in face of the devil's onslaught and live for Yahweh in every circumstance is not easy. But to fail in doing so means rebellion and defeat. Yahweh's work will still be accomplished, but we will suffer great loss. Have we missed Yahweh because we couldn't trust him in our job and walked away only to face financial disaster? Have we left our church for greener pastures only to find that the pastures weren't any greener where we went? Have we rebelled in our circumstances and found that we missed Yahweh because we didn't see it through to the end? When we face the difficulties, the hardships, and the unfairness of life, let's not miss Yahweh by running away. Face your fears head on. Take that leap of faith. Trust in Yahweh to guide your steps, and he will see you through it all. Yeshua did. Has Yahweh placed you in circumstance for a reason? You can stake your life upon the fact that he has it all under his control. There is nothing happening to you right now that Yahweh doesn't know about and that he hasn't already worked it out for your good if you are living for him. Perhaps like Queen Esther, you have been brought to this place in your life. This place of loneliness, this place of fear, this place of uncertainty, this place of doubt, this place of indecision, this place of questioning Yahweh, all for a purpose. Esther experienced every one of those same feelings. Yet Yahweh had her in his perfect will. The feelings weren't wrong or sinful, but to be disobedient to the call of Yahweh would have been sinful. Her obedience overcame every one of her fears, doubts, and uncertainty. In the end, it is not these same feelings that are wrong for you and I to have. Action. Obedience to Yahweh cures the fears. It removes the doubt. It gets rid of uncertainty. It cures indecision. It removes loneliness and answers every question. Step out by faith and watch Yahweh perform his word through us. For such a time as this, Yahweh has brought us to where we are now. For such a time as this, there are souls to be saved in the workplace. For such a time as this, there are many in our family who do not know Yahweh. For such a time as this, Yahweh is calling men and women and young people, all of his people, to work in the fields and harvest souls for the kingdom of Yahweh. For such a time as this, Yahweh has prepared you to teach, minister to those lost and dying, and hurting people all around you. Yahweh has a purpose in your life and every circumstance of your life. Put your trust in him. Let go and let Yahweh use you to bless others. He will see you through to the end, and you will be victorious. Yahweh bless.
Hallelujah.